forward with our lesson for today. All right. So I will turn everything over to you, Candace. Thank you again for joining.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna share my screen because I have an intro slide. So let me just do that one moment. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Okay, hi, I'm Candace Christian. I'm an extension associate at NC State University. I've been with NC State Extension for 8.5 years. My background is in public health education. And currently, my focus is on food safety and home food preservation. And that's where this conversation and this learning burst comes in. But I focus on home food preservation, also community meal events, working with nonprofit organizations, as well as farmers markets and food pantries. And I work closely with our nutrition team on campus as well, just to include food safety information. Okay, so just to start off, and so I have an idea of where everyone is at with either pickling or dehydrating food, what experience do y'all have with making fruit leathers or pickles? And maybe you didn't even make it, maybe you like eating it. That would be great too to hear. Feel free to write in the chat as well.
Miss Joyner, have you done anything like this?
I'm sorry. Yes, I was trying to put in the chat. I
Okay.
remember in my younger days doing that with my grandmother. She was big on jarring different things.
That's
But
great.
myself, as far as with the children, I have not done that.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
Personally, before I started this position, I had never made pickles before. But I learned how to make the first thing I learned how to make was pickled okra. And after that, it was all about exploring how to pickle. It was fun. Okay, and I see Tim grew up with pickling, preserving, canning sauerkraut and green beans. Oh, yeah, that's great. Okay. So, when we're talking about preserving food, it's really important that we talk about basically how to prevent either spoilage from happening when we're, canning, or if we're pickling or dehydrating. We want to make sure that there's like no mold or yeast growing on it. We also want to make sure there's not harmful bacteria growing on our food. So, I have this on here. It's called Fat Tom, but it's really a way to understand how we preserve food and a little bit of the food science behind it. I won't go too much into it, but for tiny microbes to grow, they need nutrients. They also, the acidity matters. So if you were to put just a cucumber in a jar, it'll probably only last maybe a couple weeks before it starts wilting, spoiling, etc. If you were to pickle it, and that means by adding an acid to it, like a vinegar or apple cider vinegar, your choice of vinegar, it's going to last a lot longer. So we really play around with acidity when we're pickling. In regards to dehydrating food or drying food, like those fruit leathers, what really matters is the moisture. So we're drying out that food to make sure that there's no moisture content in the food. Tiny microbes, they need water to grow. So we're trying to dry everything out so nothing can grow on it. And those are the two principles that we really think about when we are preserving the back end of it, of course. All right, so we'll dive right into talking about dehydrating. So this is one option to preserve your food. We'll talk about fruit leathers, but when I'm talking about dehydrating just as a basic understanding of how to preserve food that way, you can think about it as a way to reduce food waste as well. Um, it is an awesome preservation method to use if you know, you have like a few berries that you're not sure what to do with, or say you have bananas that maybe you know, they didn't get used up in the week, and that's something you could do you know, before you close out the end of the week. But dehydrating, it is a great method, and it's pretty economical as well. So there's different methods of dehydration that you can do, but essentially dehydration or drying your food, it's removing all the moisture in your food. And this prevents any sort of bacteria from growing, yeast or mold from growing as well. It's like if you buy banana chips, for example, at the grocery store, they're dry as a bone. There's no moisture to it. If there was moisture in the bag of those banana chips, they wouldn't last as long. They wouldn't be as shelf stable. So it really is eliminating all of the moisture content in that food. But there's a couple methods that we'll talk about that are the most common ways. Oven drying is really popular, so that's just you using your oven in the kitchens. So with the oven, it's going to be a slow and low cooking. So the oven, usually the lowest temperature in ovens is 170. Ideally, when you're dehydrating, you want it to about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. But with the oven, you can get good results as well. You would just want to set it at the lowest temperature possible. And drying something in the oven, it is going to take a little longer than the next method that we talk about, but it is a great option, especially since it's not another piece of equipment that, you know, you have to buy. The next option for dehydrating is an electric dry dehydrator. So that can be like the tall ones that they sell at like Walmart, Amazon. Those usually run about $40, or there's really large ones that NC State Extension uses, and they're very fancy, but other things get the job done. But yeah, electric drying, this is a method of using this small appliance, and it dries food pretty fast. Usually most foods are done drying within 4 hours when you use this electric drying like appliance, and the food is set at 140 degrees, and that's like the ideal temperature you'd want to dehydrate food. So, a common foods that we typically dehydrate is like drying nuts. You can do jerky as well. If you were interested in dehydrating jerky, I would recommend investing in a small appliance if you can to do that. And also, what we'll talk about is fruit leathers, which is really simple, easy, and nutritious way, you know, to provide snacks for children. All right, so the science behind dehydration. So as I said before, that moisture is completely eliminated from the food, and that stops for any harmful bacteria from growing, makes the food last longer as well. The optimal temperature, as I stated before, is 140. Anything higher than that, it cooks the food on the outside, and then the moisture can't escape. So it's like if you were like to grill like a burger on the grill, for example, if you that temperature in that grill is too high, it's going to cook the outside of that burger and kind of make a casing in it, and then the inside of the burger isn't cooked. It's very similar with dehydration. So ideally, when you're drying, you want low humidity and you want airflow. There's other parts of the country where people do like drying outside. So they do like solar drying. Unfortunately for us, like the sun drying in North Carolina it doesn't really work because it's too humid here. But other parts of the country, it does work. So unwanted microbes. So this is what we're trying to prevent when we're making these lovely fruit leathers, or if we're dehydrating any fruits or vegetables as well. I could not find a yucky picture of a fruit leather with mold, but this is just an example of like a dried orange that happens. So basically, every food that we eat, it's got some sort of moisture content to it, some more than others. And that really matters when you are dehydrating. So if you look at a recipe, say you want to dehydrate, maybe you want to make like dehydrated green beans or something for kids to snack on. That is probably going to take about 8 hours to dry, but if you're going to dry like strawberries, that might only take 4 hours. So, if you're ever looking at a recipe of like dehydrating something, you really want to follow what that processing time is because it has to do with how much moisture is in each food. So, sometimes you can treat food the same, but usually not. You just want to pay attention to your recipe. Okay, so this is a picture of one of the electric dryers that I was speaking about. So these electric dryers, they come in vertical formats or horizontal. Um, they work really well with most foods, except for like if you were trying to dry eggs or any sort of milk products. They make a really great like best quality products, better than the oven. I did an experiment last summer because this is one of the popular activities that we do, like when extension agents, FCS extension agents are working with 4-H agents. They dabble with dehydrating with students or kids. But I wanted to see, all right, if I dehydrate strawberries in the oven versus an electric dryer, how do they fare out? I will say that the when I experimented with it, oven drying the strawberries, they turned out well, but some of them did burn. It wasn't it wasn't even heating. Whereas with the electric dryer, it everything was perfect. Like it looked like I bought it from the store. So that's the only thing about oven drying is like sometimes it's just not perfect. Edible though and tasted great. Um, but when you are in the market maybe for a dehydrator, or you notice yourself using the oven more to dehydrate, this definitely would be a tool to consider purchasing. But like I said before, some of them are at a high cost to purchase, and then others are about $30 to $40. So it just depends on what kind of investment you want to make. All right, so with oven drying. So this works well for most foods if that temperature can be controlled. So some settings in your oven, there's a setting sometimes that says like for dehydration that you can just press and then it's ready to go. The oven at the kitchens that I use at NC State, there's no such thing as that. So I have to set it as low as the lowest it'll go is 170. So I put it the lowest that the oven will go. And it does take a little longer to dehydrate, but the products are usually pretty good. But oven drying, it takes a long time and it does use a lot of energy because you're cooking something for possibly 8 hours, 8 to 12 hours. So that's the only thing with it that I would, if you're going into oven drying, just know it might take a little while. Okay, so fruit leathers. So, this is mostly what I wanted to talk about when we talked about dehydration, but I wanted to explain the different methods if you wanted to make this product. So, fruit leathers, they're really fun way to like mix flavors on whatever you have on hand in your kitchen. So, say you have extra bananas or blueberries, those can be combined. Basically what a fruit leather is a pureed fruit that's dried in a thin layer and they're rolled into chewy fruit taffy. So you can use, if you have fresh fruit on hand, it works for canned. It also works for frozen fruit. And honestly, I've tried like all three, fresh, canned, and frozen, and you can't really taste the difference either way, which one you use. You can also use pumpkin puree, mixed vegetables as well. So like you could do like something mixed with like tomato, onion, celery. Sometimes that works well, but you can be creative with this. But really it is that you're mixing up whatever fruit you want to do, or if you want to add in a veggie to it, like maybe spinach, you're pureeing it and you're putting it on that, you're putting it on like a silicone mat, or you're putting it on parchment paper and you're just going to lie it flat. Um, and that's when you're going to dehydrate it. Another thing to keep in mind with fruit leathers is that you don't have to add an addition of any sort of sweetener if you don't want to. So usually people add things like honey, or they'll add just regular sugar or maple syrup, but you don't have to. Sometimes like the fruit is sweet enough that you don't need to do that. So that's something else to keep in mind. Um, Something that you'll need to do once you do puree all the fruit in like maybe a blender, or if you have a food processor, you want to make sure that that fruit puree is warm. So you want to heat it in a microwave. And that just adds an additional level of safety. So when you cook your food up, that's just making sure that if you're, cooking with these raw fruits or vegetables, that anything that is in there, anything that has bacteria possibly on it, or maybe you forgot to wash the fruit or vegetables before handling it, it's all taken care of because you're heating it up in that microwave. Or you could heat it up on the stovetop too. That's an option as well. But this level is more important if you're gathering fruit, like, or fruit or vegetables like from the ground or from a tree, straight from the source. Or also if you're serving like individuals that might be immune compromised. So that's just something to consider, but not something you have to do. So you want to puree until smooth. Another important part, and this is not for safety, but it is for quality reasons, you want to make sure that you're adding some sort of like lemon juice or lime juice to your fruit leathers. I personally like adding lemon juice because I can't taste it as much when I'm making leathers, and I've got a 2 and a 4-year-old, and I'm not hiding anything from them. So they know when I'm adding other ingredients to it. So those are options as well. Okay, so moving on. So you're going to line the sheet with plastic wrap, or if you're using one of those dehydrators that I showed you before, you're going to put it on the tray on there. You want to make sure that you're pouring about 1/8 inch thickness. It could be like, usually I'll make it with in a large cookie sheet or baking sheet, and then I'll cut afterwards. Or if you want it to be a smaller, you can use a smaller pan. It just really depends on what your needs are. The biggest thing I would say is to make sure that the thickness is right. You don't want it too thick because it will take a very long time to dry if it's too thick. So you just want it nice and thin. Ideally, you're drying it at 140 degrees, but like I said, if you're oven drying, just set that oven at the lowest temperature that you can. To test that it's dry after 4 to 6 hours, you're going to try to touch the center of the fruit leathers, and if there's no like, if you can't see a finger mark on it, that means that it's dry. If you press on the fruit leather and you see like your finger mark where you press, that means that it's not dry yet, and to put it back in the dehydrator or put it back in the oven and maybe check within 30 minutes or to an hour. So after it's done drying, you want to roll it in plastic wrap and you want to store in some sort of like moisture-proof container. And these last about a month at room temperature. If you store it in the refrigerator, it'll last even longer. But because you've added that ascorbic acid or the lemon juice or lime juice, it won't darken like you don't want. So that really helps adding it in. But like I said, you can experiment with fruit leathers. I will say, like in the fall, I've made I had a lot of extra apples after I made applesauce, and I decided to do an apple fruit leather for like a workshop, and that worked really well. I added like nutmeg to it, cinnamon, but like you can be very creative with this. As I said before, like you could add pumpkin puree. I've never made anything with tomato with fruit leathers, but I mean, you could explore. There's a lot of different flavorings that you can test out, and it wouldn't affect the safety. So, like if you wanted to add any sort of spices or additional flavoring, it wouldn't affect the safety of the product at all. So, this is somewhere that you can really show your artistic ability in the kitchens. When I talk next week about canning, it's a different story. But with drying, dehydrating, you can explore things. Does anyone have any questions about the fruit leathers? I think before I move on to pickling, I'm going to quickly show you the recipe that we use in extension. And this is from the National Center for Home Food Preservation. At the end of this presentation, I do have QR codes to the recipes that we use, but I just wanted to show you how it explains all the different options that you have, how many cups of fruit you would need. I mean, it goes step by step. Spices to try, flavorings to try, using like chopped dates, even for fun, I guess, mini marshmallows, but there's fillings to add. If this is something that you are interested, I would say try to use maybe start with leftover applesauce that you have. That's a very beginner friendly step to making fruit leathers, is starting maybe with apples. Okay, I'm gonna move on to pickling. All right, so what is pickling? So pickling is preserving a food by increasing the acidity of the food. So you're adding, say, a vegetable. I'll use my favorite pickle. So we're adding okra, and we're adding some sort of brine to that okra. Or also you could do a fermentation process as well. For the purpose of this presentation, we're just going to talk about quick pickles. So those are the pickles that usually you'll like get at the store, or something that like usually it's what we make at home, people make at home, something that either is stored in the refrigerator, sometimes they do freezer, or something that maybe you've seen your parents or grandparents do before as well. It's the most common pickles. The other type of pickle is the fermented pickles. So those are those like the old-fashioned ones, but those take a long time. So we're going to talk about different ones. Okay, so the different types of pickles. So quick pickles, and that's what we'll focus on today. It's essentially it's soaked in some sort of vinegar solution. Now it could be a sour brine or sweet brine, but it's some sort of vinegar solution. And that vinegar, it raises the acidity of the food that you're trying to pickle. So say you want to pickle cucumbers. The vinegar basically seeps into that cucumber, and it makes it safer to eat, essentially. So the vinegar helps lower the acidity, so lowers the pH, and that stops the growth of any harmful bacteria or tiny microbes that are going to possibly grow in your canning jar. With fermented pickles, so these are soaked in a brine. Usually the brine is salt water, and the solution, it's brined in there for about 1 to 3 weeks. So you're making this brine, the pickles are sitting there for 1 to 3 weeks, and they're basically decaying essentially. So the brine environment, it encourages something called lactic acid bacteria. And it discourages the growth of any sort of spoilage or tiny microbes that could make people sick. So that brine, it helps create something called lactic acid bacteria that really it chooses the bacteria that helps make that delicious fermented pickle taste that you want, and it gets rid of the bacteria that doesn't do it any good. So harmful bacteria or bacteria that's just going to create spoilage. So the acid made by the lactic acid bacteria, it preserves that pickle. Yes, so let's go on to science of quick pickles. So as I said, we're going to talk mostly about quick pickles, but I wanted to go over the difference just because there are two different ones that we commonly see people create. So with quick pickles, that pH, it's lowered with the addition of acid, so it's got vinegar. And this prevents the growth of Clostridium botulinum. Clostridium botulinum, that's the pathogen that causes the disease botulism. Y'all might have heard of botulism on the news, or maybe, hopefully, you don't know anyone that's had botulism, but there have been cases like in North Carolina that maybe you've heard, or in our country in general. If someone was to get botulism, a lot of times it mimics the symptoms of a stroke. So there's paralysis, blurry vision, it's really severe. So even a taste of this pathogen, this Clostridium botulinum, it could be fatal. So people, if they even have a taste of a pickle that wasn't like canned correctly, it really could be life-threatening, and people can go to the hospital for months and be on a ventilator. So, something to consider, like with pickles, like if you were planning on canning them, it is an added step that you have to be cautious with. What I have on in this presentation, us going over refrigerated pickles, which is very easy to do, something you can do with any like leftover vegetables that you have, or you're not sure what to do, or maybe you have a surplus of onions that you're like, I'm not sure what I'm doing with these this week. Well, you could pickle them. Um, yes. So anyway, we're mostly talking about quick pickles here, that we're not canning. But traditionally, you're going to process quick pickles in a boiling water bath canner. So that's basically a very large stock pot with a lid, and then you've got a rack inside. And then when we're canning, we always use a tested recipe, and I'll share some resources where you can find tested recipes. And quick pickling, it usually takes a day, depending on the recipe, but a day to 14 days for flavors to develop. Okay, basic steps of quick pickling. So you're pouring the brine, or if you were doing like a fruit pickle syrup, you're going to pour that over the cut up fruits or vegetables. Typically, and you have to look at your recipe, of course, you're going to let it stand for up to 12 hours, and that helps the flavor develop. It helps that brine to be introduced into that fruit or vegetable and let it completely seep in. Then you're going to drain and rinse the vegetables or fruit that you use. Then you'll combine all ingredients, and then you're going to either basically with canning, there's two different ways that you can pack your jars. It's either called raw pack or hot pack. We'll talk more about that next week, but basically, however your recipe says you're going to fill the jar, that's what you would do. So raw pack is you're just taking like raw fruits or vegetables, you're putting it in a jar and you put in the brine over it. With a hot pack, that means like you're putting everything in a pot and cooking it and heating it up and then putting that in the jar. But your recipe would say that. Okay, so unwanted microbes. I wanted to show pictures of real life things that have gone wrong for um, people that are specialists like me. So, if this happens to you, you are not alone. But this happens commonly with pickles, that you'll have spoilage that you do not want. It could be because maybe it's too warm in the kitchen. That's what happened in this situation. I did not realize at NC State that they turned off their AC on the weekend. And on Monday morning, I come back and my pickles that I was fermenting, they turned out like this, cloudy and had all of that mold on top. So anyway, this commonly happens. So no worries if it happens to you. But pickled vegetables, although they are acidic and acidity, it helps prevent spoilage or any sort of microorganisms that you don't want. I mean, things still grow. So a combination of preservation factors, they contribute to the growth of tiny microbes and the safety. So heat. So when you are heating up that brine or heating up those cucumbers or any sort of vegetables or fruit that you want to use, that helps kill tiny microbes that might have any sort of like spoilage that could occur in your pickles. The other thing that's really helpful with pickles is when you're introducing any sort of vinegar to it or acid, if you will. If you do want to pickle, I would recommend that you make sure that you're sourcing it should say 5% acidity on the label. That's the most common, like white distilled vinegar that you can get at the stores where it says 5% acidity. That'll make sure that you are set up for success and things do not grow in your jar like you don't want them to. The other factor that really helps with harmful bacteria from growing in your pickle jar is salt. So that creates the condition for the growth of wanted bacteria. So, and it discourages the growth of unwanted bacteria. So when you add salt to your pickles, it really helps make sure that the bacteria that you want in that jar is in there, and it makes sure the bacteria you don't want in that jar to be out of there. So it's really important that when you are looking at pickling recipes that you want to use, that you're just making sure that you are, using the right amount of vinegar that it says. You want to make sure that you're following the correct brining directions, whether that means to add salt, maybe it says to add 3 cups of white distilled vinegar to 3 cups of water. That's not somewhere where you want to be creative, because if you try to be creative with that situation, it might be a safety concern. So with brining, follow the directions. And then with pickling, if you want, this is where you can be creative, is say you want to add some spices to it or herbs. Like yesterday, I actually made pickles yesterday, and I used the recipe that I'll show you in a little bit, but I made refrigerator pickles, and I was with a high school student that doesn't like spice. So I added just a little bit to this. You probably can't see, but like I added a little bit of spice in here, but it really is like you just measure with your heart what you want to do. Like we added pickling spice to this one, but yesterday we also made pickled onions, and they're beautiful in the jar. I wanted this spicy, so I added a ton of chili peppers. I added red pepper flakes. I'm ready for this to be spicy for me. And I knew that adding whatever, oh, my dog is barking, sorry. Um, I knew that whatever spices that I wanted to add, it wasn't going to affect the safety. Okay. So with refrigerator pickles, as I said, you want to make sure that whatever vinegar you are using, you could use apple cider vinegar if you wanted to. That depends on the taste that you'd like. You must use ideally the 5% vinegar. I should say that acidity on it. You never want to decrease the amount of vinegar a recipe says. The biggest concern that I have if you were to decrease the amount of acidity is I'm worried E. coli is going to grow in your jar. So that's why I'm saying you want to make sure that you're following the directions of the acidity. So for whatever reason, E. coli, for those of you that aren't as familiar with E. coli, it is a pretty common foodborne illness that can occur. It's very acid resistant, which is pretty unusual. So that means that it can still grow in vinegar. And it can survive better in like refrigerated acid. So that's why we want the acidity to be 5%. And that's because somewhere there was studies done that if you use 5% acidity with that vinegar, that E. coli will not grow in it. So um, that's why I'm saying it is we're more concerned about like E. coli growing. And this is what they use as well. Like when you buy commercial refrigerated pickles, they use the same. They use the 5% acidity on there. Does anyone have any questions about pickles? Okay, I'm gonna show you then the, so this is our NC State website, but this is where we have the refrigerated pickles. This is a fantastic recipe that's really helpful, like, for example, reducing food waste, because it really is whatever you have left in your kitchen, or maybe you have too much of something in your garden, or something that was given to you, you can pickle anything. You really can. It's really up to you. Um, Also, like you can choose how you want it to be flavored. As my example is yesterday, I had a student that doesn't like spice, so she didn't add too much to her cucumber pickles. That's quite all right. Whereas like I might have added too much spice to my onions, and that's okay because it's all about exploring and trying things. But there are on this website some options about like fresh or dry flavorings that you could get creative with. It explains like how you would pack your vegetables. And then this is the different brines that you can do as well. So we stuck with a sour brine, but really it's all depends on what you are canning. I mean, obviously, if you are pickling a fruit, you probably want to use a sweet brine, but like with cucumbers, it's so versatile. So like maybe you want a sweet pickle. For me, I do not like sweet cucumber pickles at all. So I'm always going to pick the sour brine. But you can experiment with how you want to do that. Also on here, it basically takes the recipe above and it creates, it has a pickled onion recipe on here. And that's, it only makes one jar though, is the only thing with that recipe below. This recipe here, it'll make 4 pint-sized jars as well. Okay, we'll go back to here. So these are some additional resources that, as a home food preservation specialist at NC State, like I use constantly. So there's a website from the University of Georgia that's called the National Center for Home Food Preservation. It has a ton of free resources, a ton of free recipes that are tested in a lab in Georgia that are really easy to follow, and they are really good tasting recipes as well. Other options are extension publications. So, like I showed you, NC State, we have our own refrigerator pickle recipe, but other states as well have pickle recipes that you could follow that you can feel confident that your pickles will turn out well and they won't spoil in 3 days. But the University of Maine, they notoriously are another good option to look at for pickling recipes. And then this is my favorite preservation book, but this is so easy to preserve. So in here they have a whole chapter on dehydration. They have a whole chapter on pickling, and it talks about how you can try different things. It has different recipes. It talks about the background of how you're doing this, why this works. But it is a really awesome resource. Most extension offices in the counties have it. I'm sure if you ever went to an extension office and wanted to look at it in your county, I'm sure the Family and Consumer Science agent would be fine with that. Another decent resource are the Ball Blue books that you can purchase at Target, Walmart, some grocery stores have them. But those are also good resources to look at for recipes for pickling or dehydrating as well. And then on this slide, I have on here the recipes that I showed you. I have the QR codes for both of those. But I can also put I'll put the links in the chat as well on here. But this is my email. Um, Honestly, part of my job, I would say a quarter of my job is answering food safety questions or any questions about preservation. So feel free if you ever have a question about food safety in general or what we talked about today, feel free to email me. Let me stop sharing and then I'll put the recipes in the chat. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Thank you so much, Candace. We really appreciated all this wonderful information. And we're just asking that everybody put your information into the chat so you can get credit for your certificates today. I have, so Miss Bethel, and I don't know if it's you, Dustin, or if it's Miss Kelly on there, but if you can put your information as well. And any questions for Candace? Remember, she will be on again next week. So you can try some of the things that she said this week and come back and give us your feedback and what worked, what didn't work. We would love to hear that, especially doing it with the children. So what are your thoughts?
I know with extension, we've had a lot of success with like 4-H camps doing the dehydration, and that's because it's pretty safe and easy to use. It's not like you're using like sometimes they'll do canning, but like it's not like we're using boiling water or anything extremely hot. And it can be as simple as you want it to be. It can be, like I said, a method of reducing food waste. Use what you have. But yeah, starting with applesauce, honestly, is the easiest thing to do. And then you can go from there.
All right. Well, I don't see any questions in the chat. And as always, feel free if you want to unmute yourself and speak. But if not, we want to thank you again for this wonderful information, and we will see you again next week.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great information.
All right, Sharonda, I will send you the certificates later this afternoon.
That is fine. Thank
All right,
you.
take care. Good, have fun at your training this evening.
All right.